That is not a typical mutation. Are you absolutely sure it will not cause Lieutenant Wyatt any medical inconvenience? Cynthia asked as she stared into the cyto-stimulating Wyatt was lazily floating in with a breathing mask latched to his face. The pain he displayed the previous days was replaced by sheer boredom as the pilot couldn't do anything but float lazily in the clear, greenish, oil-like substance. Lady Cynthia, I assure you that as head physician, appointed by our beloved Marchioness herself, Lieutenant Wyatt Staples' life is in no danger. Despite his slightly higher-than-average rejection chance, all of his implants and genetic alterations have been received in full by his body. I can go as far as to praise him for his attitude. Not a single demand to be released or for us to hurry up the process has been ushered. He takes to every command given to him at face value and listens to our medical advice closely, no matter how obvious it is that he doesn't want to be here, the white coat-wearing mature man said. If I were one to listen to rumors and baseless accusations, I would believe the word going around that the lieutenant is a commoner. Cynthia frowned internally before answering. They're not baseless. Lieutenant Staples was a commoner until the prince himself elevated him to a knight banneret. Now will you answer my question? She asked, giving the man a cold gaze. Oh, I see. I just assumed that Commander Juliana wouldn't waste... His words died in his throat when the blue-haired woman next to him exhaled through her nose, loud enough for him to hear. Clearing his throat, he continued, I'm terribly sorry, Lady Cynthia. Please forgive my outburst. As for your question, his body and mind have adapted to the enhancement perfectly. The mutation is purely aesthetic. We could try to rewrite his genetic sequence and revert this mutation so that the enhancement takes its original and intended coloration, but that would take at least 2 weeks of intense gene therapy. Leave it as it is, Cynthia replied. As long as his health and performance remain intact, my princess cares not for his appearance. The doctor nodded. As Her Majesty commands, we can proceed with the release procedure at your command, Lady Cynthia. Good. First, I wish to see him from beyond this glass. Then, you can initiate the process. It shall be done as you say, Lady Cynthia. Please follow me, the doctor said, making his way to the door of the large room the medical staff had been using to monitor the progress of Wyatt Staples and at least 24 more patients going through similar procedures. When they exited, the doctor and the blue-haired bodyguard quickly walked up to Wyatt's pod, the man inside it visibly relaxing as he offered Cynthia a cordial smile. Has he seen his eyes? Cynthia asked. Not yet. I thought it would be prudent to wait until Princess Clara made a final decision regarding that issue, the doctor replied. Cynthia replied stoically. Silently, the head physician began the process that would set the pilot free after 6 days of imprisonment. His gray eyes flickered for a moment, and blue lights illuminated the interior. Slowly, the oily substance was drained from the pod, and with it, Wyatt was lowered to the floor until he stood on it with his bare feet. Once the liquid was drained, 4 mechanized hoses emerged from the pod's ceiling and started to wash Wyatt's body with pressured water until no residual oil remained. After that, the mask unhooked itself, retreating upward to fully release him. The pod opened and Wyatt took a tentative step forward, then another, and another until he was out of the pod and standing in front of the slightly taller woman he'd accepted as his friend. Diagnostics completed, the head physician suddenly said. The weave-through implant needed 1 more day to complete the integration process, but as long as you don't exert yourself for a minimum of 3 days, the process will be completed safely. Avoid any sort of heavy training, piloting, and lifting more than 30 kilos at any given moment, the doctor finished, his words sounding more like a command than medical advice. I obey, Wyatt replied with a nod. Good. Now head over to that dressing room, dry yourself, and wear your armor. Your clothes and armor are there waiting for you, Lieutenant, the head physician said, pointing to a private corridor. Before you go, Lieutenant Wyatt, a question, if you will, Cynthia asked, stopping her friend as he was about to turn about. Yes, Lady Cynthia. How may I be of service? Wyatt replied, lukewarm water still dripping from his body. Do you perchance know if there is a history of heterochromia in your family? She asked pointedly. Wyatt blinked and rubbed his chin for a moment. My mother used to tell me that her grandfather from her father's side, my great-grandfather, had such a condition, he answered truthfully. but the way she asked him such a question made him suspect that something had happened to his eyes. Choosing to be polite, he abstained from asking her if that was the case. "Guess I'll find out sooner or later," Wyatt thought as Cynthia gestured for him to continue his way. He did just that, and with the aid of an AI, soon found himself in a room the size of his quarters back in the Noir Navio. True to his word, his mesh clothes and armor were waiting for him resting inside a case, but that could wait as he approached the mirror next to the case. "What the?" he muttered the second he saw his reflection staring back at him. Tentatively, he touched his face, eyes wide as he scanned, well, his eyes. His pupils were unchanged, but his irises were different. Gone was the brown he'd known all his life, replaced by two different sets of color. His right eye was of a vibrant ice blue that gave off the illusion it could reflect light. His left eye was familiar and alien at the same time, more so than his right. His left iris was now of an intense, deep hazel color that reminded him of his mother's eye color, but warmer. The hazel color was so deep that it bordered on being orange, but not quite so. For a moment, it made him remember autumn and the days-old fallen leaves ready to be crumpled underfoot. As he focused on his eyes, now that he was out of the rather pleasant, oily substance, he began to notice something was off with his eyesight. He didn't notice it before, but his vision was better than before receiving his new set of implants. His eyesight had always been good and never needed any sort of medical procedure or glasses. Being a pilot in space didn't require good eyesight, though. In the unfathomable distances of space eyeballing, it was hardly a desired option. But he was a good marksman, and the difference was more than notable. There were no black dots in his vision. Everything was so clear and had a sharpness to it that it was unreal. As he focused more intently, he suddenly felt as if his field of vision and his depth perception zoomed in, giving him an even clearer and more detailed view of his eyes to the point he was able to see each individual eyelash and count them with ease. Wyatt blinked and jumped, taken aback by the suddenness of it. "What did they do to me?" he asked, as he touched the spot on his chest where a scar should be after putting the secondary heart in him. But it was nowhere to be seen. Whatever the oily substance had done, it had taken weeks of healing and done it in less than one. Instinctively, he turned until his left side was exposed to the mirror, revealing the scar that proved his close encounter with the Drazan. He traced his fingers over it and frowned. Part of him was glad that it was still there, a permanent reminder etched into his body as much as it was to his soul. Equally so, he wondered if healing his scar would bring him joy, satisfaction, or sorrow. He wasn't brave enough to find the answer to that question, though. Examining the rest of his body, he couldn't see any real changes. The bruise on his left shoulder was gone, but other than that, the rest of his body was as it had always been. Deciding that he'd wasted enough time contemplating himself, he moved to dry himself using a towel. Then, he put on his mesh clothes, followed shortly by his armor. Once he was done, he picked up his helmet and locked it to his belt. 2 minutes later, he was out of the dressing room and joined Cynthia, who simply signaled him to follow her. Once they were out of the large room, they walked in silence through white, pristine corridors. Suddenly, Wyatt heard Cynthia's voice in his head. "Wyatt, put on your helmet and seal it. I'll do the same. I shall then open a private channel so we can talk without risk." The pilot didn't question her order and obeyed. After putting on his helmet, sealing it with a hiss of pressurized air, he received a ping signaling a private channel had been opened. "You don't look all that surprised about your eyes," Cynthia commented. "I was expecting you to be more off-put by it. Clara will be disappointed to hear it." Wyatt smiled slightly. Despite being a princess and being one of the scariest women he'd ever met whenever she put on that cold, unreadable mask of hers, he'd come to discover that said princess also had a rather odd and twisted sense of humor. Something that Cynthia cherished about her friend, but also brought with it no small amount of embarrassing moments for the blue-haired woman over the years, no doubt. "For what it's worth, I was surprised when I saw them. Do you know how or why it happened?" Wyatt replied. "There was a chance for a small mutation, though I don't know if you were still fully aware when the assistants announced it during your surgical procedure," Cynthia began. Wyatt thought on that for a moment, and then the memory came to him. He had been far too tired to care about it after the butchery was over, and had simply forgotten about it. Not that he could talk or ask anything to the medics during his stay inside the pod. They never talked to him unless it was to ask him how he was feeling, to move, breathe, or do something in a certain way to run their tests. "I recall someone saying something about a benign mutation, but nothing else," Wyatt replied. "What's a benign mutation? Is it like tumors or something?" "Not quite. Not all mutations are dangerous or malign. Some are inconsequential or benign. In your case, though it is considered a benign mutation, it offers you no advantage whatsoever outside the aesthetic coloration of your eyes. According to the head physician, there was a recessive allele in your genome that became an active and dominant allele. This, as you may have guessed, is the reason why your eyes gained a heterochromic trait. However, the gene eye enhancement was also meant to rewrite your natural eye coloration and give you a dark shade of blue instead. The mutation that took place overwrote the gene enhancement's coloration and intensified it." Wyatt didn't understand the more technical parts of Cynthia's explanation, but he understood enough to figure out that his DNA and the gene enhancement clashed and mutated to make something else that wasn't intended to happen. "But this won't hurt me or hinder me from serving Clara and doing my duty to the prince and the principality?" he asked immediately after. "As I said, your mutation is entirely aesthetic. You'll get the benefits of the enhancement regardless. Tell me, Wyatt, now that you're out of that pod, how do you feel?" Cynthia asked, not once altering her pace or making any motion to look at him as they advanced through the medical wing. "How do I feel is a good question to ask. How do I feel?" Wyatt asked himself and pondered on the question as they walked. Little details started to become clear with each step he took, starting with the way he was walking. "I feel unbalanced, but not in a bad way. The spring of each step I take is off. It's almost as if I'm learning how to walk again without forgetting it," Wyatt replied, humming deeply at the end. "My armor also feels lighter than I remember. I myself feel lighter, but also heavier at the same time, if that makes any sense. Come to think about it, I can't really tell I'm breathing anymore. It's so smooth now. And my vision? Everything looks so much clearer than before." "The fact that you've noticed your breathing process changing shows that you are far more aware of your body than most," Cynthia praised him. "Most of your changes come from the Weave-Thew implant. It's a biomechanical implant that adds new muscle fibers throughout your entire body and enhances existing ones by weaving them together with the use of nanites. It is an intense and painful process, even with regulated anesthesia and sedatives." She paused for a moment. "You received the Tier 2 Weave-Thew, and you can upgrade to Tier 3 in the future if you so choose. But I'm afraid Tier 4 and Tier 5 are impossible for you to receive." "Trust me, Cynthia. Unless Clara or the prince order me to do it, I won't get any more implants or enhancements if it means I have to go through that again," Wyatt thought, shuddering. Despite his aversion, curiosity won. "Why?" "Because you need to be genetically and physiologically attuned to those tiers since you're in the womb, or, at the latest, before you turn 6 standard months old," Cynthia explained. "You need to grow with those implants as much as they need to grow with you. Regardless, they provide the same benefits. The higher the tier, the greater said benefits are. You are now approximately 20% stronger than before. With proper training and development, it may increase up to 30%. Not only that, but now you can run faster, your flexibility and agility have been slightly increased, and your bone marrow will also create more red and white blood cells along with platelets." Furthermore, she continued as they moved to exit the medical wing entirely, "it is intended to work in tandem with the Kinetor and Dulaxis implants, enhancing them in turn and complementing each other. Without the Dulaxis, the risk that your body wouldn't be able to adapt to the Weave-Thew would be increased tenfold. A rejection would most likely take place over the course of months, if not weeks after the surgery. Without the Kinetor, your new muscle mass would end up fracturing your bones constantly with a high possibility of breaking them. Without the Weave-Thew, those implants are safe for individual use but not at full capacity." "No wonder I feel lighter. I'm simply stronger than I was before," Wyatt thought, amazed. But as good as that sounded, he knew that nothing positive came without a drawback or two. "I understand, Cynthia, but surely such benefits cannot be all there is to it?" Cynthia let out a chuckle. "Keen as always, Wyatt. You're correct in your assumption. Because of the increase in muscle and bone density, your weight increases. Of course, this isn't a real personal issue since your newfound strength more than compensates the weight increase. A fair trade given that you're now stronger, faster, and your bones are much more sturdier and harder to damage, wouldn't you agree? Another chuckle escaped her lips. Sadly, there is one more drawback, and that is the need for nourishment. Your body will demand more nutrients to function properly. So I get to eat more without being judged as a glutton? I fail to see this as a drawback, Cynthia, Wyatt replied in good humor. Given your ravenous appetite for sweets and desserts, I am not surprised you'd see it as a benefit, Cynthia replied almost dryly. But that is an area where the trinumeter implant covers. It is widely regarded as a support implant, and it is, but its benefits are still applicable even without the presence of other implants, enhancements, and gene therapies. The secondary heart increases your blood flow, encourages the production of adrenaline, and allows more oxygen to enter your system. It won't save you if your primary heart is damaged, though. Many fools have died for thinking themselves invincible because they believe they have two identical hearts now, Cynthia said, with no small amount of disdain. Wyatt remained silent and decided to never bring up that he, too, had originally believed that he could rely on his secondary heart in case anything happened to the one he had been born with. Your auxiliary lung is much the same. It won't replace any of your lungs in case it is damaged or punctured. What it does is stimulate the oxygen intake and filtering process of your lungs. That's why breathing is so much easier now. Your respiration process is simply better now, more efficient, and gives all the oxygen your body needs. Oh, and you can hold your breath for longer now, though I wouldn't rely on it unless you're swimming in a pool, she said, and Wyatt couldn't tell if she was being serious or if she was joking. Finally, the genetic upgrade is simple in nature. It targets your internal organs to make them more efficient and less prone to failure or collapse. Your kidneys, liver, pancreas, spleen, gallbladder, stomach, digestive tract, and intestines are, for lack of a better term, enhanced in their functions and capabilities. It also benefits your natural intestinal bacteria, making it stronger and more efficient at combating other foreign bacteria, fungi, parasites, and amoebas. This also includes food consumption. You will be able to better extract more nutrients, minerals, and calories that would otherwise be wasted through fecal matter or urine. But you will still need to eat more from now on. So that means I'll make less or more use of the toilet, Wyatt thought, and a moment later shook his head, moving away from the direction his mind had taken him. Does that mean I'm a superhuman now? Hardly, Cynthia replied matter-of-factly. Not even the Royal Marines can be considered to be true superhumans. You, Wyatt, are simply now a cut above the ordinary. You can still fall and break your neck, be vented to space, and die an agonizing death if you don't have any protection. An explosion may maim you, and a poison can bring you to your knees. Never forget that. These implants and enhancements are meant to make you better, stronger, and better capable of performing your duties and role under Clara's command. Oh, I forgot to mention that you should avoid focusing your gaze on anything for the time being until your eyes are fully adapted. You can say that again, Wyatt thought, as he had been actively avoiding staring too intently at anything ever since he left the dressing room. I won't forget it, Cynthia. I promise. Good, was her sole reply. As they exited the medical wing, with the red-armored woman leading the way, a thought occurred to him. Say, Cynthia, what does the secretor implant do, and why didn't anyone tell me about the implants before the procedure began? To answer your second question first, Wyatt, that was because Clara wanted you to focus on practicing for the procession without any potential deviation taking your attention away, Cynthia replied in her usual serene, direct tone. That makes sense, he replied. And here I thought the whole thing about a new world of pain was a joke at the time. I'll be more careful of your words from now on, Lady Cynthia. You will do well to do so, Sir Wyatt. Not only my words, but those of others around you and your own, she replied with an air of seriousness that was lost a second later when she continued. As for your first question, the secretor implant was one of the two implants your rank as lieutenant entails, but was not present in the Exalted Virtue at the time. Care to guess what it does? Wyatt hummed for a moment before replying. Given the name of the implant and the location chosen for it, I believe it may be related to hair or maybe some sort of oil. Thanks to my mom, I know that we humans normally produce sweat and some sort of oil across our skin. You are close, but not by much. The secretor implant helps regulate the natural pH level that your body produces and stimulates the apocrine glands across your armpits and to a lesser degree across the rest of your body. Cynthia paused for a long, pregnant moment before letting out a frustrated sigh. In other words, Wyatt, the secretor implant makes your bodily odor less pungent. In short, it makes you smell better. Flabbergasted couldn't begin to describe Wyatt's expression when he heard her explanation, and at that moment he was damn glad he was wearing his helmet. Without thinking about it, he grumbled, matching Cynthia's annoyed exhalation, and muttered, "Insufferable, petty, idiotic blue bloods." "Indeed," Cynthia agreed. "Why would such a thing even exist? For what purpose?" Wyatt asked, the fact that he had given Cynthia an unintended insult pushed to the side in favor of trying to comprehend why such an implant could ever be necessary. "Appearances, Wyatt. There are a plethora of similar implants and even some gene enhancements dedicated solely to the exterior aesthetic of a person. Hair color, skin patterns, fingernail composition and color, and even gene splicing in some planets, though they are rare. To most nobles, one's appearance can be tantamount to power, standing, influence, affluence, and prestige. Real, projected, or otherwise. It matters not," Cynthia answered. "That or they are simply narcissistic and vain. More often than not, the second reason is the real answer." All color left Wyatt's face until he was as pale as snow as a dreadful realization manifested in his mind. "Please tell me my eye colors won't make others think I'm like those vain blue bloods? Were you not a commoner not too long ago, Sir Wyatt? Yet here you are, already worried about what others will think about you. Perhaps you truly are cut out to be a blue blood, as you put it," Cynthia jested, finishing with a throaty laugh. Wyatt let out a pained groan before another realization hit him much, much harder than the first one. "Whenever I call my family again, Wham is never going to let me live it down. What am I going to tell them about my eyes?" "The truth," Cynthia replied sincerely. The black-haired man grimaced. "You're not wrong, but that doesn't help me at all, Cynthia." Matcha. Location unknown. Jade, as was his operative call name, casually sat in a darkened room with only the light of the monitor in front of him for illumination. He had managed to gain some free time for himself, and that meant he had a chance to carry on his mission without the prying eyes of disloyal mongrels set around him. He waited patiently for the screen to change, as he had been waiting for over 10 minutes. Suddenly, the screen went white for a few seconds before it went back to black, but with the symbol of House Cayston present. "You are late, Jade," the muffled voice of Andrew Cayston spoke first with accusation. "My apologies, Lord Andrew, but I could not reach you before this time. However, our time is limited, I'm afraid. I've managed to fool Finnegan's security protocols, but they won't remain handicapped for long," Jade answered. "If that is indeed the case, report your findings," Andrew ordered. "The false prince has arrived in Matcha. Fealty toward House Astor is high here. I tried to incite a protest among commoners as a test, but they were silenced and captured within a day. Amelia Finnegan may not be a warrior, but she's a fierce woman who does not tolerate dissent coming from those under her. A revolt is unlikely to be successful." Jade paused for a moment, but all he got in response was a hum from Andrew. Taking it as his signal, he continued. "I also report, much to our dismay, that the wretched wench, Clara the Reaper, has taken as her prize the vessel her blue-haired demoness captured shortly after our plan to dispose of the Pretender Prince was met with failure at the hands of a so-called commoner turned noble." Jade paused again. "This vessel you speak of, is it a destroyer class?" Andrew asked. "It is, my lord. It is the assault destroyer Samuel's Glory, now blasphemously renamed Nornavio by the blue-haired prostitute. When Lord Samuel's name was uttered during the phony trial, I knew there could be no mistake. Lord Samuel was murdered by the vile Winfield, and his body was dumped into space like so much garbage. I am terribly sorry for your loss, Lord Andrew. Save your sentimentalities for when they matter, Jade. All I require from you is that you perform your duty. As for my cousin's fate, I shall have a rather candid talk with my father, it would seem." "Anything else?" Andrew replied, cold and unmovable. It wasn't necessary, but Jade nodded. The prince shall remain here in Macha to oversee his gathered forces and prepare to move against his Lord Regent, Duke Cornelius Draymore. I have also, sadly, failed to infiltrate a single pawn or object inside the Nornavio. The wench keeps her prize sealed tight. Furthermore, she shall depart soon from the planet. To where? I cannot say. Most likely she will go into hiding or beseech the aid of Duke Ionati or Duchess Emerald. I wouldn't be so sure about that. Despite her reputation, Princess Clara is not a coward. Most likely she will try to gain supporters to rally behind her unworthy brother's banner. You speak true, Lord Andrew. Such a shame that Lord Tamirin lacks your keen intellect and vision. Before Andrew could retort his flattering words, he continued. The mockery of a royal procession has been replayed non-stop across Macha and no doubt across most of Finnegan territory. I'm certain the footage will be released into the rest of the Principality tomorrow. As putrid as that display of arrogance is, there is one element that should warrant your attention, Lord Andrew. If this element is important enough for you to give a warning, then I demand to know more about it, Andrew commanded, his voice sounding more firm and authoritative than before. One of the banner holders accompanying the Astor Trollop you will not recognize. His name is Wyatt Staples, apparently, and he is the man responsible for ensuring the survival of the harlot at large. He was also the man who tricked me and made us move against the prince under false pretense, causing the imprisonment and the death of Frederick Anderson, Jade answered. They dare execute Frederick Anderson? Do you have proof of it, Jade? Asked Andrew. I do, but I can't send a visual confirmation just yet, Lord Andrew. I will need more time for a better window of opportunity to open itself, replied the operative. Very well. Make haste. With definitive evidence of Frederick's unjust execution, House Anderson will be assured to join the Lord Regent's banner. Now, about this Wyatt Staples? Andrew asked, impassive. After being captured, the pretender prince ennobled the man, elevating him to the rank of Knight Banneret. However, I have many a doubt regarding him. During the battle led by another of your blood, Lord Llanero Caiston, he proved himself instrumental in the destruction of the stealth cruiser Longstride to perfection. After that, he once more showed uncanny ability when he single-handedly destroyed 30 Drazan fighters in the span of mere seconds. I've analyzed the footage and the scanner data personally, and it is authentic. Then, after the Drazan left the system, he managed to fool me and use our moment of ultimate victory against us. This man, this Wyatt Staples, cannot be a mere commoner. Such talent and skill cannot come from such a lowly place, Jade said, his voice laced with disdain. He claimed to be part of the Third Fleet. I recommend that his records are to be found and revised, Lord Andrew. Given what you've told me, I shall make the effort. This Wyatt Staples, whoever he is, could be a dangerous individual if left unchecked. Andrew hummed deeply. That is all I have to inform, Lord Andrew. I shall communicate with you as soon as possible. For the Principality, Jade chanted. For the Principality, Andrew replied, and the connection died a second later. Closing his computer, Jade stood up, ready to leave the damp, dark room. Who are you in reality, Wyatt Staples?
Camrim, capital world of House Draymore. Gabriel Camrim continued to read his book while two servants set up his dining table with a fine cloth, silver cutlery, polished, elegant ceramic plates, and candles for ambiance. The bottle of wine they placed on the table rested inside a container filled with ice. A wide selection of freshly baked bread was also present, and 3 large dishes were covered by a metallic lid, keeping the food inside them warm. As always, the servants were silent, prohibited from uttering a single word in his presence. They worked quickly and diligently until they finished. Upon completion, they left as quickly as they entered, and they would be back only after he was done eating. Alone once more in his room, Gabriel closed his book, stood up from his comfy armchair, and made his way to the table. Truth be told, he was famished. Just as he was about to pull the chair, he stopped as something caught his eye. He waited for a second, but then continued with what he was doing and sat down. The blond, handsome man, the spitting image of his father when he was his age, grabbed the slightly damp but warm washing cloth and ran it over his hands, cleaning them. Setting the cloth aside, he removed the lid of the first plate and smiled when the smell of it hit his nostrils. "Roasted duck," He muttered a second before the steam revealed that, indeed, a roasted duck was before him, cooked to perfection with an ample selection of steamed vegetables adorning it. Wasting no time, he grabbed a napkin and set it on his collar before grabbing a knife and a fork to cut a large piece of the duck's breast before placing it on his empty plate. Then he picked up the wine, uncorked it, and served himself a large glass of it before taking a long sip from it. "Ah, Farbought Vineyards. Peterson spoils me." Pleased with the flavor, he cut into his meal before taking in a mouthful of duck breast. He chewed slowly, savoring the citric flavor of the duck's skin before the meat made his taste buds dance. He ate slowly, deliberately until his first plate was finished. He took another sip from his wine, and just as he was reaching for a second serving, he sighed tiredly. "How much longer are you planning on staying cloaked, Veronica?" he asked softly. A second later, the very air across his table shifted as the refraction field around his sister disappeared. "How did you know I was here?" Veronica asked, her voice cold and firm. "I caught a glimpse of the refraction effect," Gabriel answered, as he served himself the other half of the duck's breast. "Does that traitor scum know you're here?" "You will show our Lord Father the respect he deserves, Gabriel," Veronica replied, eyes narrowing. Gabriel chuckled. "So he doesn't know. Not that it matters. Not to me, anyway. So why are you here, Veronica? I doubt it is because you miss your older brother." Veronica closed her eyes for a moment and took a deep, calming breath. "Father misses you, Gabriel. It pains his heart that you think of him as a traitor. Please, Gabriel, reconsider your stance. Why must you stand against your family?" "I'm surprised he has a heart at all, Veronica," Gabriel replied before taking in a mouthful of meat. After he swallowed, he continued. "He betrayed the memory of our mother. He has betrayed his nephew, our cousin, the prince. Any pain I can inflict upon him, I shall gleefully do so, for he deserves no love from me after his betrayal." Veronica crossed her arms, her intense green eyes set upon her brother while he continued to eat. "Look at you, Gabriel, groveling at the feet of the false prince, she began, but was interrupted when a flying knife bounced off her shield. As the knife clanged against the ground, her eyes were set on her brother's irate expression. "Don't you dare speak his name with that treacherous tongue of yours, Veronica. He is the prince, and nothing but the prince until either death or destiny takes the throne from him," Gabriel half shouted in pure fury. The siblings shared a glaring contest for several moments until he closed his eyes, sat down again, and took a large sip from his wine. Veronica smirked. "You've just proven my point, Gabriel. You're a blind follower of a man unworthy to be the prince in the first place. The Council of Nobles took years to recognize him as prince. In fact, they didn't. Now, did they? Just as our father was denied the title of Lord Regent, he was denied the full ascension and recognition as prince, didn't he? That may be the case, but it matters little. He had been the prince for over 3 years after our uncle's death. He has been the prince we deserve," Gabriel countered, opening his eyes. "I am loyal to the principality. I am loyal to the prince. I am loyal to my family, Veronica. You, on the other hand, know not what loyalty is." Veronica's expression twisted into an angry snarl as she pointed a damning finger at her brother. "You claim to know loyalty when it is you who doesn't know what true loyalty is. Our Lord Father is the only one who can lead the principality until he properly guides a true successor. The hammer of Draymore is strong, brother, but you are weak and petty. Mother would be ashamed of your attitude." Gabriel narrowed his eyes. "Perhaps. I know she wouldn't approve of the way I treat our traitor of a father. But if Mother would be ashamed of me, then she would be disgusted by you, Veronica. Your blind devotion and borderline fanaticism toward our father would sicken her." "This is getting us nowhere," Veronica huffed. "Repent, brother. Repent and beg for our father's forgiveness. You can still join his side and stand proud as you should next to his magnificence." "And if I don't? What will you do?" he asked in defiance. "Will you torture me? Kill me? No, of course you won't. You wouldn't risk earning our father's scorn. Not again, anyway." He let out a dark chuckle. "Or would you, I wonder?" Baring her teeth, Veronica slammed the table. "Father never scorned me, Gabriel. I made a mistake, but I've learned from my mistakes. Unlike you, I am no coward. I am Veronica Draymore, proud daughter of his lordship Duke Cornelius Draymore, the Hammer of Draymore, Lord Regent of the Principality. He's not recognized as Lord Regent, though, Gabriel replied with a winning, smug smirk that caused his sister to fume in anger even more. However, I agree that I am a coward. I am not a warrior. I'm a statesman, a bureaucrat. I like counting credits and organizing laws. But you're mistaken if you believe yourself as a warrior, Veronica. You're nothing more than a butcher, remember? Instantly, he regretted letting his bravado and anger get the better of him. Veronica's expression darkened and her eyes grew cold. Then, after what felt like a short eternity, she looked away, ashamed and hurt. Gabriel stood up and slowly made his way to his sister until he was within arm's reach. Then he hugged her, and she returned the gesture. I'm sorry. I was out of line with that last remark. I didn't want to hurt you, Veronica, Gabriel said softly. I know, Veronica replied. Please, Gabriel, reconsider. Father said to me that I shouldn't judge you as a traitor for refusing him. I try, brother, I try. See the light, Gabriel. Even you must know that our Lord Father is better suited to lead the Principality, even if only as Lord Regent. Perhaps so, Veronica, Gabriel replied, letting go of her, his expression solid as granite and equally unflinching. I never doubted that our father was a great man, but his actions are that of a traitor. Only an Astor may rule the Principality. He renounced his claim long ago. I'm sorry, truly I am, but I will not join him. Not now, not tomorrow, not ever. And when he falls and the prince stands victorious, I will do everything in my power to gain his mercy and at least ensure your safety. Veronica let out a long, pained sigh. I see that trying to talk sense into you was futile, brother. Contrary to what you may believe, I do not hate you, Gabriel. I pity you. As our Lord Father's firstborn, you should be standing next to him, not me. I shall do whatever I can to fulfill our Lord Father's vision into reality, and I sincerely hope that you will join us when our victory is achieved. Enjoy your meal, Gabriel. With that, she walked away and soon was out of his room, leaving him alone once more. Gabriel returned to his seat, eyed the glass of wine, then reached for the bottle and drank from it until it was empty. I wish I could get drunk, he muttered tiredly, the rest of his meal forgotten, his appetite lost.
Matcha, capital world of House Finnegan, Grand Palace. Wyatt Staples sat across a table, his attention fixated on the chessboard as he struggled to decide which piece to move next. Across the table sat the prince wearing a placid smile, as he too focused on the match. Sitting on the sidelines as a spectator waited Cynthia Winfield, her expression serious and unreadable. The prince had summoned them an hour after leaving the medical wing, and while they were in the middle of preparing to leave Matcha upon Clara's command. Heeding his request, they answered his call only to find that the prince wished to have a chess match with Wyatt before saying his parting words. The pilot felt relieved that the prince's command was for him to enjoy something trivial, though he suspected it wasn't that entirely. After a respectful greeting on his part, the match began and they had said nothing since. So far he had taken 4 pawns, a knight, and a bishop from the prince, while his liege had only managed to secure both of his knights and 3 pawns. All in all, he was winning. Taking his black-checkered bishop, he moved it to the point that an opening had presented itself, endangering the prince's king. "Check," Wyatt announced. "Not for long," the prince replied before moving a pawn to block Wyatt's bishop. Rubbing his chin for a moment, Wyatt moved his queen, eating up another unprotected pawn. To his surprise, the prince then moved the left side rook and the king at the same time, putting them closer together in what could pass as a protective formation. "Is that allowed?" he asked suddenly, confused and surprised by the move. "Quite so. It is called castling. I quite like it, though it is not advised to rely on it too much," the prince answered with a playful smirk. "I wonder if I'll ever be able to use an en passant on you, Wyatt." En passant? Is that another strange moving rule? Perhaps I should buy a rule book or something. Wyatt said in his mind before analyzing the board for long, silent moments. Frowning, he moved his right-side rook to a position that threatened the prince's queen. Too late, he realized his mistake. The prince let out a throaty chuckle before moving his queen, eating the unprotected rook. "Check," Wyatt hummed, his right hand dangling over the board, trying to see all his possible moves. Sadly for him, he only had one to make. Moving his white-checkered bishop, he put it in front of his king, protecting him. The prince, however, showed no mercy, and with the use of his remaining knight, made a move that ate a pawn and also positioned it ready to strike at his king. "Checkmate," the prince announced, smiling. Then he inhaled deeply and then exhaled slowly in complete satisfaction. "He's a marvelous player, isn't he, Cynthia?" "Seeing you two play hurts me mentally," Cynthia replied dryly. "Honestly, my prince, you should give up on your dreams of playing professionally. You are a lousy player." "I'm surprised that Wyatt, with his tactical acumen and outside-the-box thinking, matches your lackluster skill," the blue-haired woman ended with a playful grin. Wyatt sat there, speechless, as the color drained from his face. He had gotten used to the playful banter between Clara and Cynthia. They were longtime friends after all. But to hear Cynthia talk in such a way to the prince made his heart skip a beat out of sheer panic, which was only worsened when he heard the prince's reply. "Ha!" The prince barked a laugh that came from the deepest part of his belly. "It seems that your skill with the sword has not dulled, Cynthia. Your tongue is as sharp as your blade." Smirking, he turned his attention to the baffled Wyatt. "Is something the matter, Sir Wyatt Staples?" Wyatt shook his head in an effort to shake off his surprise. As he did so, the memory of his second meeting with the prince came to him. Oh, that's right. He did mention that Cynthia was a friend dear to him. If Clara and Cynthia are close, then it stands to reason that the prince and Cynthia share a similar bond, he reasoned, and his racing heart slowed down. "I was merely surprised, my prince. I had forgotten that you previously mentioned that Lady Cynthia is your personal friend, my liege." "I suppose it would be surprising to those not close to me that I can be so jovial and open?" the prince asked slyly. "Nevertheless, Cynthia is indeed a dear friend of mine. I've known her ever since we were children. For all intents and purposes, we grew up together side by side. There is trust, companionship, and a sense of honesty between us. Away from prying eyes, are we not allowed to relax? Is the prince not allowed a moment of reprieve from the weight of ensuring the stability of his realm?" "I wouldn't know, my prince. But if it is you who says it, and judging from the examples I've witnessed, then it must be true," Wyatt replied. "And yet you've not questioned why I have summoned you?" the prince asked, leaning on his armchair. "It is not my place to question your summon, your majesty. I am your knight Banneret. Your command is all I need to act," Wyatt replied solemnly. "Unless innocent lives are in peril," the prince said, remembering the oath made during his ennoblement. "And you're not my knight Banneret, Wyatt. House Astor is your patron, this is true, but if anyone has any claim of ownership, that would be my beloved sister." He paused for a moment, closing his eyes, and he relaxed into his seat. "Which, coincidentally, is the reason why I have summoned you two before me. You will depart soon on a task that I could only trust Clara to carry in my name. Wyatt Staples, would you give your life for my sister, your princess, if need be?" "Without hesitation, my prince," Wyatt replied instantly, his voice filled with honesty and conviction. "More than my princess. Clara is my friend, and so is Cynthia. Their lives are more important than my own, this I know, but that doesn't matter to me on a personal level. To me, they are precious. I swear to you on everything that I hold dear, my prince, that no harm shall come their way for as long as I draw breath." To his right, Cynthia smiled while the prince nodded once in approval. "Clara was right. You possess the soul of a true knight, a valiant warrior who fights for what is right regardless of actions and consequences to his well-being. You may not believe in honor, Wyatt Staples, but you are a man of honor, not the sort that comes with accolades and self-serving actions. Rather, your honor is your own, that unsurmountable force of will that has fascinated me with every action you've taken." The prince paused, eyes narrowing as he tilted his head slightly. "I will not insult you, Sir Wyatt, by promising you rewards beyond imagination. You are not a man that can be bought with mere baubles or the temptation of power. A powerful strength and a dangerous weakness if exploited by your enemies. Do your duty to the best of your capabilities. This I ask not as the prince, but as a brother. Protect Clara, even if that means protecting her from herself. He turned his gaze to Cynthia. The blue-eyed woman nodded once. Then he continued. You've earned my trust in this regard, Wyatt Staples. Loyalty is its own reward. Loyalty is its own reward, ye prince, Wyatt replied. I shall do as you've requested of me. Good. Then you may leave. Clara already knows I've summoned you, so you will decide whether to share or not what I've told you with her. I shall remain here and coordinate our forces and strike out against the traitors within our capacity. A proper counter-assault shall take us months of preparation at the very least. Time is, for the moment, my uncle's ally. Fortunately for us, his window of action is becoming narrower with each passing day. Cynthia stood up a moment later, followed by Wyatt shortly after. The two bowed their heads respectfully before turning to leave the room. Oh, before I forget, one last thing, the prince called out. Your eyes may have a different shade now, Wyatt, but your gaze remains unchanged. Ensure that it remains that way, or, failing that any changes that may come are positive ones. With nothing more to be shared, the prince waved his right hand about lazily, and the doors of his quarters opened, revealing the ever-vigilant royal marines standing guard near their liege. Wyatt and Cynthia walked in silence, ignoring the staff and anyone else they encountered on their way until they reached the ample launch yard with a single shuttle waiting for them. Next to it stood Princess Clara, now wearing her set of purple armor while Milcades flanked her holding an umbrella over her head. The two stopped in front of her and bowed their heads. Let us depart, came her simple order. Milcades closed the umbrella and boarded the shuttle without uttering a word. Cynthia took his place next to her princess, and soon the three of them boarded the shuttle's cockpit. Wyatt sat on the pilot's seat and went through the diagnostics and necessary tests before igniting the engines. The doors closed, and with a hiss of pressurized air, they were sealed. The shuttle shuddered as it began to ascend. As they hovered 10 or so meters above ground, he pressed a button on his panel. Control, this is Shuttle NTS-001 currently transporting Her Majesty Princess Clara, requesting permission to leave friendly airspace. Over, Wyatt spoke in his usual serious tone. We read you, Shuttle NTS-001. You have permission to leave. I repeat, you have permission to leave. For the Principality and our beloved Prince, may your journey be a safe one. Over, a professional voice called back. Understood. Copy that, Wyatt replied, letting go of the button. Glancing at his passengers, he found them sitting steady and latched on. After a quick inspection of the other passengers at the back, who to his surprise only consisted of Milcades himself, Wyatt ascended more and did so at an impressive speed. A minute later, the rumbling of the engines diminished considerably, and he could feel them more than he could hear them. The sensation of weightlessness assured him they were in orbit, and a quick inspection of his coordinates confirmed they were on their way to the orbital ring's transit checkpoint. Well, isn't this nostalgic? Clara suddenly spoke, breaking the silence. It reminds me of our first shuttle trip to Woodshaft. Only this time the circumstances are not so dire. The black-haired man couldn't deny that she had a point. The shuttle was of standard design, identical in dimensions and proportions to the one they had used at that time. Remembering that time and everything that spiraled out of that seemingly unimportant voyage brought out a smile that he couldn't hide. Just please don't let Clara fly this time, Wyatt. We don't have the privacy or the time to indulge in such activities, said the blue-eyed woman as she crossed her arms. You should relax more often, Cynthia. It will do you well, Clara replied. That aside, I'm certain that my brother Dearest summoned you to have more than a friendly match, Wyatt? Given that the prince had granted him free rein on how to reply to her, Wyatt felt no need to withhold any information. Your brother, the prince, tasked me with the duty of protecting you, Clara. No matter what happens, know that I'll stand next to your and Cynthia's side. I'm at your service and disposal, my princess. Clara let out a soft whine mixed with a giggle. Brother Dearest worries too much about my safety. With me out of his shadow, his negotiations shall proceed smoothly, and he may focus more effort on finding the whereabouts of Alexander and Giovanni. Although I appreciate your loyalty and dedication, Wyatt, I'd rather not have you die for my sake, nor anyone else for that matter. If a sacrifice is needed, then let it be so. Only when there is no alternative, she said, her voice somber yet firm. Clapping her hands twice, her smile returned. Unsavory topics aside, there is much that we must do. I shall share with you the secret of our dark reputation once we are safe aboard the Noir Navio and heading toward our first objective, Wyatt. For now, know that our mission, with the blessing of my brother and acting upon his authority, consists of 3 objectives. The first is simple. Gather any relevant and important information regarding traitor movements, forces, and whatever other knowledge we may be able to acquire. Incendiary secrets are as effective, if not indeed more so, as blades or firearms can be. It is the other 2 objectives that require our attention the most. Firstly, House Ferentis has declared itself neutral, but they must not be allowed to neither remain neutral nor to declare themselves for my uncle's faction. House Ferentis is strong and borders both Caiston and Finnegan territories, but their strength does not come from military power. In fact, they believe that true power comes in the form of grain stalks and the weight of meat. Clara chuckled softly. They do have a point. I'll grant them that much. I am to strike a deal with House Ferentis, so that their vast agricultural go to the right bellies at a fair price or in our favor if at all possible. Wyatt nodded in approval. Volantis had never experienced a true famine, but there had been periods in which many stomachs growled for one reason or another. A fungi infection devastating vast amounts of Lakoa farms, Clixol numbers dropped dramatically one year or exploded in another, taxes and rival blocked cutting off trade for months at a time. A full stomach was crucial even during patrol routes. Secondly, this objective is much simpler in theory, yet incredibly so more difficult in any theoretical execution. For you see, Wyatt, we are to engage with Caiston forces so that we may learn the location of Caiston Army and Navy officers regardless of rank. Once found, we are to eliminate them under either the rules of engagement or through formal duels. If at all possible, I would have Tamirin Caiston's head as a trophy. If not, then his son, Andrew Caiston, shall suffice. Again, Wyatt found himself nodding in approval. So that we may deprive Duke Draymore of one of his most loyal followers, Wyatt stated flatly. Precisely, my dear Wyatt. Precisely, Clara replied, her eyes cold and focused. I shall not stand idle while my uncle consolidates his forces further. The hammer of Draymore is strong, then I shall prove that it can also break.